Okay, let's do a bit of texturing then. So there's a few questions came in this week about why your textures weren't sitting flush or why you were getting strange stretching problems. So I figured we would do a very simple step-by-step on applying a very basic image to a very basic object. So I find myself out in the garden taking photographs of this brick and then modeling said brick, duplicating it a couple of times, and making a video about it. That's how I spend my Monday evenings. I don't know about you guys. So we'll come back to that image in a minute. Objectives for today then are to look at what unwrapping is, what UVs are, and then to actually go through the process of unwrapping and texturing a simple object. These are the steps you'll be taking, and I'll come back to these and leave them on the screen if I remember at the end of the video. So very quickly, U and V are just the surface coordinates of the 2D version of a 3D object. Okay, so don't worry too much about what UV means. They're just the 2D coordinates of a 3D object. And then unwrapping is the process of sort of unfolding the faces of a 3D object so that you can then apply and creating the UVs. So that's the UVs that have been created, and applying a 2D image to that 2D version of the 3D object. Blender then magically stitches it back together in the 3D view for you and applies those UVs to the 3D object in its three-dimensional form. If we didn't have this process, we'd be trying to cram a 2D image around a 3D object. We'd be getting flashbacks of Christmas. Everything would be overlapping, stretching, tearing. We'd be crying. It'd be a bad scene on the whole. So we create these UVs by unwrapping a 3D object, and it's just a command in Blender to unwrap, and then it gives us access to those UVs. The UVs are accessed through the UV image editor. We select the faces in edit mode and hit U, and that gives us our unwrap options. There are a few automatic options that I'll talk about very briefly, and that Blender gives you, and you can then apply those UVs to the images. For more complex objects like characters and so on, it's a much bigger deal. You can see this artist has created seams. These red lines are edges that have been defined as seams so that when Blender unwraps it, it knows to keep the arm separate from the body and so on. So therefore, the arm UVs, wherever they are, can have a particular piece of artwork applied to it. It's much easier to handle. But this is quite a complex process. We are keeping it super simple, and we're just going to unwrap the face of this cube here and apply the UV that's created to an image texture to create this facsimile of my garden brick. So let's do that. So a couple of things you need to make sure. You need to make sure you've got a material on your object. So just make sure you've got a material there. If you've added the object in, it might not have one. The default cube obviously has one. So let's have a look at the UVs. If you click on the UV editing workspace, Blender automatically puts you into edit mode here, and it gives you the UV editor on the left, and it shows you these UVs. I'm going to get sick of hearing me say those two letters. By going into face select mode here and selecting that face, you can see it's showing us the corresponding UV, and this one, etc. All right, it does seem a bit strange that when you select a face here, the rest of the UVs disappear. So you can turn on the sort of UV sync selection mode with this button here, but I'm just going to leave that switched off just now. And these are the UVs. So we've got a square face, we've got a square UV. Where we can come into problems is when we model something like this little brick. So I'm just going to talk about this idea of applying scale to an object. Let's just model the brick. Let's have a look at its scale settings. So it's 1.7 on the Y and 0.6 on the Z. I'm going to take it in on the X a little bit and a bit further on the Z. So we've now got some non-uniform scale values. And when we go back into edit mode and select that face, the UV is still a square. So if we applied an image to this, it would be stretched across that face. That might be one reason why you're getting some strange stretching happening. So we do need to apply the scale. We need to reset these values. So back to edit mode, our UVs disappear. Control A, and let me just turn on screencast keys. Don't know how helpful that is, but Control A, and we apply scale, and you can see that the scale values are reset to 1. So this means actually when you go straight back into edit mode, it hasn't changed them. But if we were to unwrap this again, if you were to select them all and choose one of these algorithms I mentioned, like cube projection or smart UV project, we will hopefully get some better results. So I'll try this cube projection option. So it's organized them badly, but you can see that the face that I've got selected now has a corresponding UV that makes sense. Okay, we're not going to use cube projection today because as you can see, it can be a bit time consuming. You've got to select these and move them about so they're not all overlapping. At the moment, all of these UVs that have been created with that algorithm have been overlapped one on top of the other. So they correspond better to the scale of our object, but it's going to take a bit of work to organize this image editor so that we can apply images to it without them all overlapping and looking awful. So you can spend a bit of time doing this kind of stuff and move all those UVs around, but we're not going to do that. We are going to project from view. All right, so just ignore this stuff just now, and we're going to top view, and we're going to use this view and project from view option, and it will create a hang on, just select that top face on its own. I'm just going to choose project from view, and it has projected the UV from the view that we have here in the 3D window, which is our top orthographic. All right, and there's top face as a UV. So if we open up an image, so I've got FileStream installed here. That's a hint. Don't know why I've got a VFX folder though. Into my bricks folder, I've got all the photos I took earlier and the PNG that I spat out from Photoshop. Okay, so I'll open that up. Whoa, I'll just zoom out a little bit. Okay, and we have some different selection modes. It is selected at the moment. If I deselect it, we've got face select, edge select, and vert select for UVs. So I'll just select face select, click on the little dot in the middle. It's quite difficult to see. And we can rotate this round and apply it to the top view of my brick here. Just scale it down. So just S to scale, G to grab, R to rotate, and that looks okay. So let's have a look at how that is displaying here. So we've got a material. We need to make sure we've got a texture set. So we go to the texture properties, click new, and we select that image that we've created there, or that we've added to the image editor. We select that as our texture. One more stage to go. We're just going to split the window here quickly and go to our shader editor. And this is what we should really be paying attention to, is these nodes and doing a bit of basic shading. This is the node here for the default material. Okay, you can see the same settings down here in the material tab, but this is the node editor for combining different types of surfaces, etc., to create various different results. So I'm going to add in a image texture. So just Shift A, go to textures, and then image texture. I'm going to take the color output from the texture and put it into the color input of the material, because textures have to go through a material to work. And I'm going to select that texture here from the little drop down. Okay, so we've got a material, we've got a texture set here in the texture tab, and we have a texture node in the node editor that's going into that material. So if we go into Look Dev, there is that top face applied to our 3D object. And the rest of it is just giving us these crazy results from that cube projection I did earlier on. So we'll sort that out. Going to right orthographic, U, project from view. Just hitting A to select it because it's the only thing in the window. Just RY90. I'll just chuck that on the side photo. Scale it down a bit. And Control 3 for the left orthographic, U, project from view, A to select it, RY90 again, grab it, Put it down a little bit more. It's strange that that is projected slightly differently to the other side. 1 for the front view, project from view, select it, put it somewhere that makes vague sense. I don't have the front of the brick, but that looks all right because actually the edges of these bricks have got a bit of an orange tint to them, so that bottom piece might work okay. And we're back with Control 1, New, project from view. Put that somewhere that makes sense. There's not as much orange happening here, but so let's put it over here. RY90 and scale it down a little bit. So something to note is that you can see as I scale that the textures are kind of zooming in and out. If I scale this down, it zooms in on the texture. And because it's not a very high resolution image, that's going to look super blurry. So you really do want to try and make sure your UVs are kind of as big as possible, as long as it fits with the model and so on. Okay, and there's a brick. Let's leave it there. Now let's do a little bit of modeling. Before we do that, the default material has this specular highlight, so we'll turn that down, okay, so we don't have that strange kind of gleam across the whole lot. So we'll turn the specular highlight down. And then let's do a little bit of modeling, actually. You could inset that top face and extrude that down to get that indent on the brick. But if we do the inset, it will cause some strange stretches to happen. So I'm going to do some loop cuts instead. So I'm going to do Control R. Let's just go to the top view. It's quite difficult to see where that is. I'm just going to double tap the G key to move it down on its kind of perpendicular edges. Control R again. Actually, before I do that, this is a great addition to 2.8. By default, it has correct UVs ticked. Okay, it used to be the opposite in 2.79. So without it ticked, it would stretch the textures about like this. My double tap G, and that's no good. So with correct UVs ticked, we don't have that problem. So we can add edge loops and slide them about, and it doesn't distort the texture. So let's add some more here and here, and then let's very quickly extrude that down. And you will see some stretching happening. And that's because the image is being projected straight down through the object. Okay, so all these lines, this black line here is just that black dot right on the edge there that's just been projected straight down through the model. So we need to sort out those stretches by selecting that face and projecting that. You can see why it's stretched because the UV is squashed on top of itself. I might actually just scale that in a little bit. Let's not worry too much about it. And select that face and project it. And move it somewhere that makes sense. Okay, and then the last piece here, project it from view and then slot it in somewhere. I could more accurately get lined up, but it really doesn't matter for that situation there. Okay, so it's coming on a little bit. I think the next thing I'll do is just very quickly talk about bump mapping. Before that, it's crying out for it. You know what I'm talking about. Control B, bit of a bevel, add in some resolution. Look at that. Okay, so bump maps. A bump map is a sort of image texture you can combine with the diffuse, the color, the regular texture to create the impression of actual bumps, actual indentations, actual areas which are raised and areas which are not raised on the surface here, using the lighting information. It's pretty amazing. So normally you have to create a grayscale image of this, a grayscale version of this in Photoshop, and then a fairly complex little setup to make it work. But we can kind of fudge it together by adding in a bump node. I'll just search for it and add in a bump node there. And we're going to take the color not only into the color input of the material, but into the height input of the bump. And then from the normal output of the bump into the normal input of the And there we can see some pretty nasty bumps. I mean, it's doing a pretty good job. If we turn the strength down, and let's check it in rendered view, and that's looking all right. It's looking all right. Okay, and that's about the size of it. Why is it hanging there? Now we've got some issues, but if this was sitting in the corner of your room or your scene, should you need a set of stacked bricks, I think that would be quite passable. Okay, it wouldn't be too terrible. So I've missed out a lot. There's quite a lot going on that we haven't covered. As I said, this is a whole kind of specialized area in itself. You can get a job as a texture artist, as a UV editor. So there's lots that we've missed out here, but that should be enough to get you started, get your head around moving UVs around, putting them in positions that work, and hopefully it's kind of demystified the process a little bit, because it can be slightly terrifying when you see crazy photographs of very complex UVs. So, hopefully that helps, and I'd like you to try those steps and try and make something cool. It does actually work quite well with Ian Hubert's video. He did a video which is similar, I think, on modeling an air conditioner. I think he uses the cube projection system. I just skipped through to the end so you can see the end result. I mean, it is pretty amazing, very fast. Clearly, this is much better. This is funny, and it's only 1 minute long. So give that a bash. It's only 1 minute of your life. And you can have a go at adding these photographic textures to your 3D objects. We will at some point come back and look at texture painting, which is a completely different process. It's similar, but obviously you have to create these types of images yourself in Photoshop or in Blender. But for the time being, I think that's enough to get your head around working with those UVs. So hopefully you can follow those steps, and please get in touch if you need any more help, and I'd be delighted to help you out.